Hey there, it's Wednesday, which means it's time for another Ask Me Anything session with yours truly, where I'm answering all your questions about the publishing industry and writing a better book. I have Luca behind me, so always a good luck charm for me in these sessions, and I've been so excited to dive into more of your questions today. Before we get started, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and also pop into the description below to download my free story self-assessment. It's a worksheet I specifically designed for my YouTube followers to identify the strengths and weaknesses in your own manuscript. I know that can be so hard to do, especially if you haven't had a chance to work with beta readers or an editor. So if you have a work in progress of any type, definitely check that out and let me know how it goes. It's also going to sign you up for my newsletter, where I give exclusive tips and insights not available on my channel. We have some great questions on deck today, so let's dive in. First question here. I've recently graduated with my master's and have been trying to get an internship or job in the publishing industry. Even though I have a few years of experience, I worked as an assistant editor for a lit mag during my time in school. I've been denied an entry-level job because of lack of experience, and even internships have denied me for the same reason. How do I increase my chance of getting an opportunity when the industry doesn't want to send one my way? I totally understand the challenges you're facing with finding a job and an internship in publishing, because I have been there as well. The truth is that the publishing industry is extremely competitive for authors who want to get published by a major publisher, and it is extremely competitive to get a job in the industry as well, because there are a lot of people who want to work with books for a living. So two things that I would recommend here to potentially get your foot in the door. The first is doing informational interviews with people who are working in the industry. This was something I did when I was in school, and it is what allowed me to get that first internship, which then led to giving me more experience, where then I could get additional jobs and pad my resume for the industry. So reach out to people. Maybe there's a network within your university. You mentioned having a master's. So if there's anyone who is an alumni who works in the publishing industry, reach out to them. And, of course, ask for their insights, ask for their tips, but also potentially ask them if they know of any openings in the industry, or they know of anyone who is hiring for an intern or an entry-level role. Like a lot of industries, publishing is extremely network-based and network-oriented, so the more people you know, the more people you can connect with on a personal level, the better your chances of getting one of these positions. My second piece of advice here would be to cold email literary agents and see if they could use any type of help. Potentially, this would mean an unpaid type role where you're going through their queries and helping them sort through what is a potentially strong query that they should review and what should be rejected because it doesn't match what they're looking for. Agents are extremely overloaded with queries pretty much at all times, and this is typically what an intern would do at a literary agency. So even if they aren't actively looking for a paid internship role, if you're in the position to maybe put in some part-time hours, unpaid or potentially at a lower hourly rate for a literary agent, that's a really good way to get some experience as well directly in the industry. I actually cold emailed a literary agency that I was interested in working with, and that's how I ended up getting a job with them. So it's less likely that a publishing house, unless it's a smaller indie type publishing house, would respond to a cold email like this because they have internship programs. But literary agencies typically can always use some more hands, even if they aren't actively looking for an intern. I hope that helps, and I wish you the best as you find a role in the industry. Here's another question. What's the difference between a 1 million copy selling book and a book that doesn't even earn out the advance? You've worked in the industry, and what do you think is the main ingredient that makes a book a bestseller? I wish I had an answer that would be straightforward, and then everyone could follow that, and then everyone who's writing could sell 1 million copies, right? Wouldn't that be amazing and helpful? There's no secret formula, and there's no secret ingredient that's going to automatically make your story a bestseller. And even people in the publishing industry don't know what books are going to take off and what are not going to earn out their advance, as you said. Though I will say that not earning out your advance is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, many books that you see in Barnes & Noble do not earn out their advance. So that does not necessarily mean they are not successful or do not have good sales. It all depends on obviously the number of sales, but also the advance amount. So I want to detach from the idea that not earning out your advance means your book is a failure, because that's not the case. But I see what you're saying. You're basically asking, what is the secret ingredient that makes one book take off and sell a ton versus a book that does not sell very many at all? Of course, there are important elements of story that set a engaging and effective and immersive story apart from one that is less successful. And that would be engaging, authentic feeling characters, an intriguing and propulsive plot, and of course, the writing craft has to be at a certain level. I think another element that often gets overlooked, and in fact, I recorded a whole other video about it, is a sense of suspense. Remember that readers need to be given something to keep reading for. Otherwise, they're going to put the story down. Make sure you have that sense of tension, because that's going to be what creates narrative urgency and propels the reader to tear through the pages. That is the feeling you want to give the reader, that they have to stay up all night to figure out what happens because they're so immersed in the story. Definitely check out my other video on the secret behind all bestsellers for some more detailed insight on that specific point. Here's a similar question, actually. I know there's no formula for success, but are there certain qualities you observe in bestsellers versus mid-list novels? I'm thinking specifically about psychological thrillers. Why do some books gain traction and stay on the bestseller list for several months or even a year or more, and others make the list for 1 week, then drop off? I've read a lot of these books and can't always see a difference in quality. Few things I want to go over here. First, let's talk about bestseller lists a little bit. So you brought up the fact that certain books stay on bestseller lists for weeks and even months, even more than a year, and others pop on for the first week or two and then drop off. There's been a lot of talk, especially recently, about bestseller lists in the industry. And the truth is that to some extent, bestseller lists can be manipulated by publishers. Every bestseller list has different metrics that they go by, and publishers, especially the big 5 publishers, know these metrics and therefore can position certain books on launch, especially during that launch week, to achieve these certain metrics so that they pop on that bestseller list, even if they don't stay there. I'm not going to say that they're completely manipulated, because of course they're not. The book does have to make a certain number of sales to get on the bestseller list, but publishers might put a lot of marketing spend behind pre-orders, for instance, so that when that first week comes, all of those pre-order sales are now bolstering in addition to the sales that week. Maybe they have a bunch of campaigns that go out that week, and that's what pushes that book to the list, and then it drops off after. So I want you to just understand that bestseller lists are not the be-all end-all for a successful book versus an unsuccessful book, because there are nuances to those metrics, and it is a bit of a flawed system in and of itself. Remember that publishers want as many books as possible to hit the bestseller list, even if they pop off, because then they can put bestseller on the cover, which they do pretty much immediately as soon as it gets on the list, because then that in turn will help them sell even more copies. That was kind of a sidebar, but let's talk about the meat of your question, which is, when it comes to psychological thrillers, why do some stay on bestseller lists and continue to sell a ton versus others are kind of mid-list and, sell respectably but don't pop off? For psychological thrillers, which is one of the genres that I love and specialize in, I've read so many psychological suspense novels you wouldn't believe. I think it comes down to a couple of things that set apart these major bestsellers from the others. The first is a truly surprising twist. I mean, anyone who's reading suspense, especially psychological thriller, is looking for a twist that's going to blow their mind. And the more crowded this genre becomes, the harder and harder it is for authors to come up with unique twists that truly shock and amaze readers. So if a book is able to deliver that shocking twist, I think that helps a lot to make readers then compelled to recommend that book to others, because we know word of mouth can then spiral and is what contributes to a lot of these bestsellers staying on the list for so long. Another element when it comes to psychological suspense, I think, is an engaging voice. A lot of these novels are written in first person, so if we connect with the narrator on a deep level, if there's something really intriguing about them, I'm thinking they don't necessarily have to be an unreliable narrator, but there's something about them that draws us in. That also contributes to the book's success. And lastly, I would say the setting. A unique and evocative setting always pulls a reader in. I'm thinking of an example like The Guest List by Lucy Foley, where you're on this island and you're isolated and the setting just oozes off of the page. Those would be my top insights regarding psychological suspense specifically. All right, we have time for one more question. How do I make sure my query letter is the best it can be? I've received nothing but rejections, and I really think it has a lot to do with the format of my query. There's a lot of things you can do to ensure your query is the best that it can be. The first is make sure that it follows the publishing industry standards. So I have a specific video that goes through paragraph by paragraph everything that your query letter should include and in what order. Definitely check that out. If your query does not follow that format or does not include all of the information that is listed there, then that could mean it will get automatically rejected by a literary agent because they are not receiving everything that they need to consider your book. The second thing I would take a look at is the plot blurb where you describe your book in the query letter. This is ultimately your pitch to the agent. If the plot blurb is intriguing and engaging, it's going to compel the literary agent to pop into the manuscript and read those opening pages to see if they want to read more. If the plot blurb does not engage them and does not seem interesting, they're likely not going to read the manuscript and they're going to move on to the next query. So definitely make sure that is as strong as it can possibly be. I have another video on the plot blurb specifically and how to make sure it is engaging, so definitely check that out. But in short, you want it to read like the back cover copy that you see on a hardcover book or the description that you see on the Amazon page for a book online. It should pique the agent's interest. Also get a friend or a professional editor to read the query for you and provide any insights on how you can make it more engaging and interesting. That's all we had time for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a question, leave it in the comments on this video. This is the queue I use when I'm going through and answering, and I'd love to help you out as much as I can. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and your free story self-assessment is waiting for you in the description below. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.